It's just before 6 in the morning, and Miss still clings to the car park at Ryozenji, the first stop on a journey that will take her the length of an island and back again. A woman ties a conical sedge hat under her chin, checks the wooden staff leaning against her shoulder, and steps through the temple gate as the first bell of the day sounds out across the rooftops of Naruto. She will walk for weeks. Somewhere beyond the pines behind her, unseen from where she stands, the tide is dragging the sea through a channel under a mile wide, twisting it into whirlpools 20 metres across, one of the most powerful tidal currents on the planet. She has come to walk in more or less a straight line, around an island that keeps insisting, in almost everything that it does, on the shape of a circle. This is Shikoku, the smallest of Japan's 4 main islands, tucked south of Honshu across the Seto Inland Sea. It holds 4 prefectures: Tokushima, Kochi, Ehime and Kagawa, and for over 1,000 years it has held something else too, a pilgrimage of 88 temples that loops the entire coastline and climbs deep into the mountains. Ian Reader, Professor Emeritus at the University of Manchester, has spent more than 2 decades studying this route on foot and in conversation with the people who walk it. What he found surprised even him. Many of the pilgrims are not first-timers working through a bucket list. They are retirees who return again and again, some completing the full circuit dozens of times, treating the pilgrimage less as a single journey than as the centre of the rest of their lives. To understand why an island this size could hold that kind of pull, you have to go back to the man the route is built around. Kukai was born in 1774 at what is now Temple 75, Zentsuji, into a minor noble family on Shikoku's northern coast. He travelled to China as a young monk, brought back the teachings that would become Shingon Buddhism, and spent time wandering his home island, training in caves, climbing its highest mountain, chanting on a lonely stretch of the southern coast until, by his own account, sky and sea seemed to become one and the same thing. After his death, he was given the name Kobo Daishi, the great master who spread the Dharma, and the temples associated with his life and legend were eventually numbered and linked into the circuit walk today. The number itself is not accidental. In Buddhist teaching, human beings carry 88 earthly desires, and each temple exists to help a pilgrim work through one more of them. Walk the whole thing on foot and it takes somewhere between 30 and 60 days, covering around 1,200 kilometres of coast road, mountain pass and quiet farmland. It's worth sitting with that number for a moment. An entire island's geography, arranged across 12 centuries around a shared idea of what it means to carry human flaws and slowly walk them off, one temple at a time. Every pilgrim staff and hat still carries 4 characters, Dogyo Ninin, 2 people, 1 practice. It's not a boast, it's a reminder that whoever is walking, however alone they might feel, Kobo Daishi is believed to be walking beside them. The white robe most pilgrims wear was, centuries ago, a burial shroud, a quiet acknowledgement that the road might not end well for everyone who set out on it. And yet, the overwhelming feeling reported by those who walk it today is not dread, but welcome. Locals along the route still practice osetai, offering pilgrims free food, drink, even a night's lodging, a custom that stretches back through the Edo period, when this was one of the only pilgrimages in Japan followed mainly by ordinary people rather than the elite. A stranger in white, staff in hand, is not treated as an intruder here. They're treated as an honoured guest on someone else's spiritual errand. What does it say about a place that its central tradition has survived more or less unbroken for over a millennium, while almost everything around it has been rebuilt a dozen times over? Perhaps that endurance has always been Shikoku's real character, not stubbornness, but a kind of patience the rest of Japan largely left behind. That patience shows itself very differently a little further inland in the Iya Valley, one of the most isolated pockets of terrain in the whole country. Steep gorges, thick forest, and for centuries almost no road worth the name. Legend holds that after their catastrophic defeat in the Genpei War of 1185, survivors of the Taira clan fled here, deep into the mountains, so difficult to cross that the newly triumphant Minamoto forces largely gave up the chase. To move between the ravines, the refugees are said to have built rope bridges out of mountain vine, Kazurabashi, strong enough to bear a person's weight, but simple enough to cut down in moments if an enemy came close. There were once 13 of these bridges strung across the valley, but only 3 survive today, quietly reinforced now with steel cable for safety, but they still sway and creak underfoot, exactly as their reputation promises, suspended 14 metres above the river below. The villages that grew up in that isolation are still there, clinging to terraced hillsides, their thatched roofs and narrow paths largely unchanged. But isolation that once offered protection now empties a place out from within, and nowhere shows that more strangely than the hamlet of Nagoro, tucked further along the valley. In the 1960s, it was home to around 300 people, most of them working the nearby dam. Today, barely 30 residents remain. When Tsukimi Ayano moved back to care for her ageing father, she made a scarecrow in his likeness to keep birds off her vegetable patch. Neighbours mistook it for him and greeted it on their way past. She kept making more and more, positioning them at bus stops, in classrooms of the school that closed years ago, tending fields that no longer have farmers to tend them. There are now close to 400 of these figures scattered through Nagoro, roughly 10 scarecrows for every living resident. Stand in the old schoolyard, surrounded by cloth children frozen mid-game, and you're looking at something closer to memorial than an art project. A village quietly reassembling the shape of a life it no longer has enough people to live. Ask yourself what it would take to build 400 neighbours out of cloth and newspaper rather than simply walk away, and you start to understand how deeply this island's remoteness runs and how differently its people have chosen to answer it. Because remoteness has not always meant retreat here. Down on Shikoku's southern coast in what is now Kochi Prefecture, a very different response to isolation was taking shape 2.5 centuries after the Genpei refugees went to ground. Sakamoto Ryoma was born in Kochi in January 1836, the son of a low-ranking country samurai in the Tosa domain, a rank so far beneath the aristocracy that his family's neighbourhood was kept physically separate from those of higher birth. Rather than accept the limits that came with it, Ryoma left Tosa without permission in 1862, a crime punishable by death under the rigid rules of the time, and set out to do something almost no one in Japan's feudal system was doing, moving freely between rival domains and building relationships across old enemy lines. Within 4 years, he had brokered the Satsuma Chosu alliance, uniting 2 of the most powerful and historically hostile clans in the country against the ailing Tokugawa shogunate. Aboard a Tosa ship off Nagasaki in 1867, he drafted an 8-point proposal calling for an elected assembly, a written constitution and the end of feudal rule, ideas that would go on to shape the parliamentary system Japan eventually adopted. 1 month after the shogun formally returned power to the emperor, the event historians call the Meiji Restoration, Ryoma was assassinated in Kyoto at the age of 31. He never saw the country he had helped drag into the modern world. The same island that once sheltered defeated warriors in its most impassable valleys had also produced a man determined to tear down every wall keeping Japan separate from the rest of the world. Kochi still claims him fiercely. His statue stands on the cliffs at Katsurahama, gazing out to the Pacific, and generations of Japanese schoolchildren have grown up on his story as a symbol of a country choosing, for once, to look outward rather than in. Put these threads side by side and Shikoku starts to look less like a single place and more like an argument Japan has been having with itself for over 1,000 years, between the pull toward enclosure and the pull toward a wider world. A monk who left for China and returned with something new, a clan that vanished into the mountains to survive, a samurai who broke the law simply by walking out of his own domain. Every one of them found something on this island that couldn't have happened anywhere else, and every one of them changed something far bigger than Shikoku itself. Back at Ryozenji, tradition holds after visiting the 88th and final temple, many pilgrims return here, to Temple 1, simply to close the circle they started weeks or months before. The woman who set out at dawn with her staff and her sedge hat will, if she keeps walking, end up standing more or less where she began, changed by everything in between. The tide will still be turning the strait into whirlpools a few miles down the coast, exactly as it has for longer than anyone has bothered to measure, entirely indifferent to who has finished their journey and who's just setting out. If you have ever walked somewhere long enough to come back a different person, you already understand what draws people to this island year after year. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe if you want more places like this one, built as much from memory and stubbornness as from stone, and tell me in the comments the one word you would use to describe Shikoku.